Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about making a blue mage spellbook setup. Specifically, this is for people who have all the actions or people who do not have all the actions but want to see which ones they should prioritize getting. This is also for a DPS blue mage, aimed at doing trials and raids. This is not an appropriate setup for healing, tanking, or dungeon DPSing. There will be separate videos on those setups. First off, we're going to need to become a true DPS, and that means using number 77, Ethereal Mimicry. You can cast this on another DPS, including other blue mages, regardless of what mimicry they might have on, and it will give you a special buff that matches that person's role. In this case, you're going to do more damage. This is something you would put on before the fight starts. As such, it doesn't really need to be on your primary bars. There are two places I would recommend. The first place is just on some bar you don't use very much in battle but you still have. And the other is on a menu bar. Personally, I prefer it on a macro menu since it allows me to put bar 8 for all of my non-battle actions. I do have a video on how to set that up. By placing it away from your real bars, you are far less likely to accidentally press it and turn it off during fights. Next up, we need some utility. You will want number 29, Diamond Bag, for mechanics. Since all blue mages are considered DPS from a mechanics perspective, and the mechanics do not look at the mimicry at all, it is very possible for you, as a DPS blue mage, to end up receiving a mechanic that is meant for a tank. You will also want number 72, Angel Whisper, which is your res. Blue mages do have a res, but it has a very big cooldown. So because of this, it is up to every party member to bring this utility, as your healers will not be able to res multiple people in a row. Now let's go into our opener. I want to be extra clear. The best blue mage opener is still up for debate. Not only that, but it will also change based on your spell speed and your ping. Try to understand what it is doing so you can feel empowered to make adjustments if better information comes along. Now, before the fight starts, you will want to use number 64, which is Whistle. This will power up your next physical expected spell. Once the fight starts, you will want to use number 82, Tingle. This does do a small amount of damage, so be careful not to pull the boss early. This is lightning expected, so Whistle will not affected, and it will add another buff for your next physical expected spell. So now we're going to have two buffs ready for our next physical spell. However, we're not going to use it quite yet, because, well, first of all, we still need to get into melee range, and two, well, we can buff it some more. So after Whistle and Tingle, we're going to use number 39, Moon Flute, which powers all damage for 15 seconds, and then stops you from using any actions for 15 seconds. So this gives you a 15-second window to do as much damage as possible. This is the main reason why your spell speed and your latency will affect your opener, as you have to do it within only 15 seconds. And there are a lot of spells and abilities that will be good to include. As such, I will be doing the rest of the opener mostly in such a way that hopefully you will not miss out on anything extra powerful if you end up unable to use the last few actions. To get close enough, we're going to weave that Moon Flute into number 80, J-Kick, which will make you jump to the boss. Now you can finally use number 81, Triple Trident. This is a 450 potency attack in melee range that you've now buffed 3 times. Do note that Moon Flute is not a fully shortened cast. It's only short by half a second. This is not enough time for the J-Kick animation lock. That means you will have some clipping when you start Triple Trident, and that's perfectly fine. Let's show the opener so far. But, well, we're still not done with that opener. Next up, we're going to weave that into a swift cast. Yes, this is another clipped weave, but it will be worth it. Now we can use our most powerful GCD, which is number 100, Matcha Magic. As a DPS, it is 800 potency, and it's still buffed by Moon Flute. This will be instant, so you can do a double weave. I'm going to recommend we go into number 104, Night Bloom. This is an extremely powerful ability. Not only does it do 400 initial potency, but then it does a 1 minute damage over time bleed. For the second part of the weave, this is where you'll find some differences between my opener and other people's. I'm going to put number 103, Phantom Flurry. This is a 2-part attack. First, it does the initial 200 potency, which isn't that good. But then, as long as you don't move, including your camera, it does a second 600 potency, and going to start a GCD. This means you get to have it as part of your double weave, and then naturally start another weaving window, and that's why I like it. We will take that right into number 78, Serpenaka. I'm sure you might be familiar with this if you've looked at Blue Mage before, but basically, you can do 4 attacks and each one of them gets stronger and stronger, and it is very, very strong. Once all 4 are done, you're going to be doing number 90, the Rose of Destruction. And that will go right into a number 47, Shock Strike. The Rose of Destruction is a 400 potency spell, and Shock Strike is a 400 potency ability. You might need to practice on a dummy when it comes to your timing for going from Serpenaka to Rose of Destruction as quickly as possible. Now, what comes next will depend on your spell speed. If you can manage to fit number 15, Sharpened Knife, number 48, Glass Dance, and number 44, Feather Rain, then do it. Otherwise, take away Sharpened Knife. See, Sharpened Knife is actually just one of your basic spammable spells. You still have some more powerful spells available, but you don't have enough time. Since it's a very short cast time, this becomes an option. You could also use number 63, Sonic Boom, for the same reason if for some reason you don't have Sharpened Knife on you. However, if you cannot fit all 3, just doing the last 2 will be more potency. Yes, this means you're technically clipping your GCD, but it doesn't matter because the game is about to stop you from using it anyway for 15 seconds. But if you look at the math, it's better. See, Glass Dance and Feather Rain will do more damage than Sharpened Knife and Glass Dance. Now, I normally don't like to macro anything because of the lack of queuing, but because this opener is so unbelievably tight, the only way to fit it is by not having to do the ground targeting at all. So yes, I'm using a macro. As you can see, I'm pressing Sharpened Knife, and then I immediately went to queue Glass Dance. Then, by spamming the macro right after I press Glass Dance, I'm basically forcing the system to keep trying every few milliseconds to do one of these Feather Rains the moment Glass Dance is done. Glass Dance will still be prioritized because it's been queued, officially. Well, the opener is finally done. That took forever. Let's talk about your limit break instead. Blue Mage still doesn't have one, but you can of course make your own, and it's called number 8, Final Sting. Hugely powerful attack, but it will kill you. Do not use this if you're trying to learn an action. But in fights that you're doing for your Blue Mage log or for achievements, this can be a powerful homemade limit break. You do want to power it up first with Whistle and Moon Flute. Order doesn't really matter as to whether you use Whistle first or Moon Flute first, but if you do use Moon Flute first, you would have enough time to do a few other spells before having to use Whistle and Final Sting. Just be careful not to run out of time. So you know your opener, and essentially your limit break, but what's in between? Well, let's talk about Off Guard and Peculiar Light. Ideally, someone from the party should keep number 20, Off Guard, and number 43, Peculiar Light, on the boss at all times. Both of those make the boss take more damage, but they share a cooldown. They can stack, it just means 2 different people have to use it. During the opener, that really should be the tanks or healers, since the DPS should be focusing on that Moon Flute window as much as possible. But you will probably need to put this at some point during the rest of the fight, when you're refreshing it. If you're working with Party Finder, you'll probably just take a guess as to which one to bring and when to use it. But if you're in a proper static, try to organize. Ideally, you want to have 4 and 4. Just make sure at least one of each is assigned to either a tank or a healer for the opener. Thanks to Night Bloom, you have a very strong bleed every 2 minutes, but it lasts 1 minute. That means it's not up the entire time. That's when you want to still hit that classic Bristle and Song of Torment combo. So number 9, Song of Torment, is also a bleed, and number 12, Bristle, makes the next spell stronger by 50%. Song of Torment and Night Bloom are both classified as bleed. That means they override each other. That's why you want to use this after the Night Bloom bleed is already done, but you're waiting for it to come back on cooldown. Some people do wonder if bristling is worth it, since it does cost a GCD. Well, let's take a look at 2 GCDs. You can use Bristle and Song of Torment, which will give you 750 potency, or you can use a basic GCD and Song of Torment, let's say Sharpened Knife, which is 220 and then 500, which would be 720 potency. Overall, yes, you should still try to bristle your Song of Torment if possible, but it's not a huge deal if you don't. Let's talk a little bit about Flute. As a DPS, you already know you're using it for your opener and for your fake limit break, but do you use it in between? Well, it depends. You do lose on 15 seconds of attacking, so you have to make sure that buff window is well worth it. Because of cooldown differences, you may not have your entire opener available all at once again, but you should want to at least have the following skills available: Night Bloom, Phantom Flurry, Matra Magic. Why didn't I include Triple Trident, even though we know it's super awesome? Well, because Night Bloom and Matra Magic are at least similar in cooldown time. Night Bloom is 120 seconds, and Matra Magic starts at 120 seconds and gets adjusted based on your spell speed. However, Triple Trident has a 90-second base cooldown that gets sped up, so you'd be delaying it by around 40 seconds. Delay it twice and you've cost yourself another Triple Trident. It's therefore debatable if it's worth delaying to fit into the same Flute buff window as the Night Bloom or not. Things like Shock Strike and Feather Rain have a 60-second and 30-second cooldown. If you're using them on cooldown, they should be back up around the same time as Night Bloom, so you should still have plenty of actions you can use, even if it doesn't fit the exact opener. However, there is another point about Flute, which is that you might not want to use it at all in between. See, while the damage boost is fantastic, that 15-second time when you cannot do anything could potentially cause a wipe if you forget to account for a DPS check, such as an ad phase, so be careful when you use it. If you're not using Flute during the mid part of the fight, or any part where you could be using it but you decided not to, you should consider using Bristle for your absolutely most powerful magic spells. Specifically the ones that are over 300 potency, which would be Rose of Destruction and Matra Magic. While Bristle does buff the next spell action, it's only by 50%, and it does mean you're losing out on using another GCD. To merely break even on using a Bristle, you do need to use it for something that does at least 300 potency, so don't use it for your spammable attacks. Well, what about the other damage, right? Well, first of all, you'll probably end up using many of the actions that are in your opener quite a lot, especially anything that's a 30-second or 60-second cooldown. But beyond that, you've also got number 84, Cold Fog. This one can be extremely strong, but you absolutely have to know the fight as a DPS to make good use of it. So first, let's explain how it works. When you use it, it does not do any damage. You get a buff. If you get damaged during this buff, you will get a different version of your button called White Death, and you can spam this for the remaining duration of the buff. If you time it right, you could end up with a 400 potency GCD you can spam 6 times. You should not use Bristle for this, except maybe for the very first White Death, and even then, only if you remember to use Bristle in advance. Next up, we've got number 60, Magic Hammer. MP management can get hard, and sometimes Lucid isn't enough, but Magic Hammer will do a slightly stronger GCD, 250 potency, and it will restore some MP while also lowering boss magic damage. And of course, after that, you've got your spammable GCD action. We already talked about these. You've got Sonic Boom for when you're doing faraway mechanics, and you will take a 10 potency loss, but you will have range and a full weaving window of 1.5 seconds. And then you've got Sharpened Knife, which is 220 potency, and you still have the full weaving window, but it's in melee range. However, that doesn't mean there aren't other options. So let's get to talking about swaps. Unfortunately, you only get to have 24 blue mage spells you can bring from your spellbook, but there are more than 24 useful ones. Depending on the fight, you may need to make some swaps, so let's discuss why. As mentioned, you already know you might swap Off Guard for Peculiar Light, or vice versa. But you might also get number 93 Blaze as a replacement for Sharpened Knife. You would still have 220 potency, but now you will have a long range. However, it comes at the cost of losing your weaving window. You only get to have half a second, so you will clip. So why would this replace Sharpened Knife and not Sonic Boom? Well, the problem with Sharpened Knife is that you have to be in melee range. So let's say you had to do a mechanic and you were using Sonic Boom, and now you want to get a range, you have to slide cast to make it as efficient as possible, and not everybody's really good at that. So some people might just walk up and lose precious time when they could be attacking. At that point, it's better to have a long range 220 potency attack. And basically, you use this attack, in this case Blaze, anytime you want, but if you want to do something that requires a weave, you just switch back to Sonic Boom. Technically speaking, you don't have to pick specifically Blaze. It can be any action you want as long as it is at least 220 potency, is spammable, so that means a recast that is your GCD, has a range of 20 yalms or more, and is for an actual target and not something like a conal in front of you. Next up, we have number 75, Devour. This action is similar to Magic Hammer in the sense it is 250 potency. And you do get to use it roughly every 60 seconds, so it's pretty often. If you don't like Cold Fog, maybe you just have trouble with getting the timing right to make sure that it actually activates, you can consider Devour to be the designated, slightly weaker, but designated replacement. Next up, we've got number 86, Saintly Beam. This is a GCD, so it would most likely replace Sharpened Knife. If it's used against undead creatures, it can do a 500 potency attack, which is the strongest spammable GCD for Blue Mage at this time. But it has to be undead. A fight like Sigma's Cape once Savage would benefit from you making that swap, and potentially others. After that, we've got number 71, Revenge Blast. This spell can be useful, but only in a static, really, where people do talk about cooldowns and things like that. I would not recommend this for a PF group. Basically, if your HP is under 20%, you will do a very, very powerful attack. This is ideal for using after a mechanic that you know will hurt you a lot. But it also means that people should not heal you immediately after, so you have a chance to actually press it. This can be difficult with random Blue Mage parties, since a well-timed White Wind can easily ruin that, and it also means you have to know when damage is coming. Speaking of number 13, White Wind, you might notice it's not in this setup. You really should be trusting your healers and your tanks to heal you. However, if you cannot, for whatever reason, then yes, you can make space for it. So, what are some good options to swap at? Well, we've already mentioned Sharpened Knife can be replaced, usually by another damage attack. You can also remove Glass Dance. Yes, it's 350 potency, which is technically stronger than Feather Rain, but you can use Feather Rain more often because it has a shorter cooldown. Which means that overall, in the span of a fight, Glass Dance will do less damage. Then you've got Cold Fog, as mentioned. If you just don't like it, maybe you just don't want to bother thinking about when damage is coming next, you can remove Cold Fog and replace it with something else. And if you really have to, Bristle or Song of Torment. Alright, that is the end of the video. It was quite a bit long. Next up, I will be working on the Blue Mage Healer and Tanking Spellbook Guide, and hopefully those will be a little bit shorter. I'm going to quietly show off the controller setup and give you a bit of time to think about whether you want to hit that like button, or I suppose the dislike button if you feel I did a terrible job. Oh no.